I did not raise my voice. I did not slam the door. I simply picked up my coat from the chair where I had laid it 40 minutes earlier, folded it over my arm, and walked out of my own daughter's house like a man who had somewhere better to be. I did not look back. That was Thanksgiving, and that was the last day I let any of them see me as the man they thought I was, a tired old widower with a bad knee and a soft heart, easy to push around, easy to fool. They were wrong about me for a long time. I let them be. My name is not important. What I am is a father, 67 years old, retired after 31 years as a structural engineer for the state of Ohio. I built bridges for a living. Real ones, the kind that carry 18-wheelers over rivers in winter. I know how things hold together, and I know better than most exactly when something is about to fail. I should have seen it sooner. That's the part that still keeps me up some nights. My wife, Patricia, passed away 6 years ago. Ovarian cancer, stage 4, 14 months from diagnosis to the end. She was the kind of woman who apologized to the nurses for being too much trouble. She never complained once, not to me, not to our daughter, not to anyone. When she died, she weighed 89 pounds and she still managed to smile at me from that hospital bed and say, "You're going to be okay, Art." That was her way, always thinking about the other person. After she was gone, I rattled around our house in Dayton for about 8 months. Too many rooms, too much quiet. Our daughter, Melissa, called every Sunday. At first, the calls were about an hour long, then 40 minutes, then 15. I understood. She had her own life. She had her husband, Lawrence, and their 2 kids, and a house in the Columbus suburbs that I helped them buy in 2019, $40,000 toward the down payment, written as a gift, no strings attached. Because that's what Patricia and I had always planned to do when the time came. Lawrence was a salesman, medical devices. He drove a leased Audi and talked about his quarterly numbers the way other men talk about sports teams. I never disliked him outright. He was pleasant enough at holidays. He remembered to shake my hand when I came through the door, but there was always something behind his eyes when money came up. A kind of calculation, a quiet arithmetic that I noticed and filed away the way I used to file structural anomalies in bridge inspections. Not dangerous yet, worth watching. In the spring, 2 years after Patricia died, Melissa called on a Tuesday, which was unusual. She said Lawrence had an opportunity. A franchise. A regional chain of urgent care clinics was selling territory rights in central Ohio, and the numbers were extraordinary, and the window was closing, and they needed a silent partner with capital because the bank loan only covered 60% of the buy-in, $220,000. I asked how long I had to decide. She said the offer expired Friday. I want to be honest about what happened in my chest when she said that. It wasn't suspicion, not then. It was something warmer and stupider than that. It was the feeling of being needed, of being the kind of father who could still do something that mattered, who still had a role to play now that Patricia was gone, and the house was quiet, and Sundays felt like they lasted 4 days each. I said I would think about it. I thought about it for 2 days. I called my accountant. I called a friend of mine from the engineering firm who had invested in small medical businesses. I looked at the franchise documents Melissa emailed over, a 40-page PDF with a lot of formatting and not enough substance. My friend said the projections looked optimistic. My accountant said the LLC structure was unusual. I told myself they were being cautious because they didn't know Lawrence the way I did. On Thursday, I wired the money. That was my first mistake, and it was a large one. But it was not the one that mattered most. The clinic opened in October. I went to the ribbon cutting. Lawrence gave a short speech. Melissa stood next to him in a blazer she'd bought for the occasion, and she looked so much like her mother for just a moment. The angle of her jaw, the way she tilted her head when she was trying not to show she was nervous, that I felt a surge of something close to joy. I told myself I had done the right thing. I drove home to Dayton, and I made a turkey sandwich, and I watched the evening news, and I thought, this is what family does. Over the next 14 months, I received 3 financial updates. Each one was shorter than the last. When I asked follow-up questions, the responses took days. When I asked to see the full quarterly statements, Lawrence said the accountant was compiling them. When I asked the second time, Melissa said I was creating stress at a critical growth stage, and that she wished I could just trust them. I backed off. I should not have backed off. In March of last year, I had a conversation with my neighbor, a man named Don who taught economics at Wright State for 28 years before he retired. We were standing in my driveway, and I mentioned, in the general way you mention things to a neighbor, that I had invested in my daughter's business and hadn't seen real accounting in over a year. Don looked at me for a moment. He didn't say anything dramatic. He just said, "Art, go see a lawyer before you say anything else to anybody." I went to see a lawyer. Her name was Catherine Howell. She specialized in family asset disputes. She was 50-something, direct, and she had the particular quality of good lawyers everywhere, which is that she made me feel simultaneously calmer and more alarmed. She listened to everything I told her. She asked for copies of all the documents I had. She asked about the wire transfer records, the franchise agreement, the LLC operating agreement, and the original gift letter from 2019. Then she asked me if I had ever updated my will. I said I had not touched it since Patricia and I had drafted it together in 2014. She pulled up a form on her computer and turned the screen toward me. It was a document I had never seen before. A codicil to my will, dated 11 months earlier, signed with what was meant to look like my signature. I stared at it for a long time. It amended the distribution of my estate, my house in Dayton, paid off assessed at $412,000, my retirement accounts, my remaining savings, which at that time totaled just under $300,000 after the clinic investment. The codicil redirected everything, all of it, into a trust controlled solely by Lawrence. Not Melissa. Lawrence. I want to tell you what it feels like to see your own signature on a document you never signed. It is not anger, not at first. It is a cold, specific disorientation, the way I imagine it feels to walk into your house and find the furniture rearranged. Everything is recognizable. Nothing is right. "How did you get this?" I said. Catherine told me she had a contact at the county probate office. Someone had filed it for pre-registration. It was not yet legally in effect. That required my death. But the filing created a record. "Who filed it?" I asked. She said Lawrence had filed it himself, using a notary whose license had lapsed 6 months before the document was dated. I drove home from that meeting and I sat in my kitchen for 2 hours without turning on any lights. I thought about Thanksgiving, which was 3 weeks away. I thought about Melissa. I thought about Patricia, who would have known what to do, who always knew what to do, who always knew what to do. I thought about the $40,000 in 2019 and the $220,000 wired on a Thursday because I wanted to feel needed. Then, I stopped thinking about the past, and I started thinking about what came next. I called Catherine back the following morning. I told her I wanted to do 3 things. First, I wanted to update my will, legitimately, witnessed, notarized, airtight. Second, I wanted to file a complaint with the Ohio State Bar regarding the notary. Third, I wanted to do absolutely nothing that would indicate to Lawrence or Melissa that I knew anything at all. She said, "That's a very disciplined approach." I said I used to inspect bridges. You don't poke at a crack before you know how deep it goes. Over the following weeks, I did what Catherine told me. I met with a certified forensic document examiner who confirmed that the signature on the codicil was not mine. The pen pressure was wrong. The loop on the letter A was wrong. 3 specific characteristics were inconsistent with my genuine signature samples. I met with a detective at the Franklin County Sheriff's Office who specialized in financial crimes. I provided everything: wire transfer records, franchise documents, the LLC operating agreement, which Catherine had passed, and found something remarkable. Lawrence had restructured the entity 9 months after opening, removing my name from the investor schedule entirely, reclassifying my $220,000 as a non-equity contribution. In plain language, a gift. In plain language, gone. The detective's name was Sergeant Foster. He was a quiet man who wrote everything in a small notebook with a mechanical pencil. After I finished laying it all out, He looked at his notes for a moment, and then he looked at me and said, "Mr. Hafford, I want you to go have a normal Thanksgiving." I said, "I intend to." I drove to Columbus on Thanksgiving morning. I brought a pie pecan from a bakery Patricia used to love, the one on Brown Street in Dayton. I brought wine. I came through the door, and I hugged my daughter, and I shook Lawrence's hand, and I played with my grandchildren on the living room floor for 45 minutes while the game was on. Lawrence was relaxed in the way that people are relaxed when they believe they have already won something. He opened the wine early. He told a long story about a golf weekend. He called me Art every few sentences in that particular way, too often a little too warm, that I recognized as performance. Dinner was good. The turkey was good. My daughter is a fine cook, and I told her so. Afterward, when the kids were watching a movie, and Melissa was in the kitchen, Lawrence sat down across from me at the dining room table with a second glass of wine, and he said there was something he'd been meaning to bring up. He said the clinic was going through a restructuring. He said these things happened in business. He said he wanted me to understand that the original investment might have to be considered a loss, at least on paper, but that the overall enterprise was healthy, and that he expected things to even out over the next few years. He said he just wanted to be transparent with me. I looked at him. I kept my face completely still in the way I learned in 31 years of presenting findings to state transportation boards, the kind of stillness that can be mistaken for either understanding or stupidity, and which is actually neither. I said, "I appreciate you telling me, Lawrence." He looked almost disappointed that I didn't push back. I helped clear the table. I said goodbye to my grandchildren. I hugged my daughter at the door, held on for just a moment longer than usual, long enough to feel her go slightly still in my arms, some flicker of something she didn't let reach her face. And then I picked up my coat from the chair where I had laid it, folded it over my arm, and walked out to my car. I did not look back. The arrest came on a Tuesday in February. I know because Sergeant Foster called me at 7:45 in the morning before I had finished my coffee. He told me that Lawrence had been taken into custody at his home at 6 a.m. He was charged with forgery of a legal instrument, elder financial exploitation, and fraudulent transfer of assets, 3 counts in total. The forensic accounting had uncovered additional transfers I hadn't even known about, a separate account Lawrence had opened and a variation of the clinic's LLC name, through which he had redirected $46,000 over 18 months. I put down the phone and I finished my coffee. The case went to Franklin County Common Pleas Court. I attended every session. I sat in the gallery in a suit and tie, and I did not speak to Melissa, who sat on the other side of the courtroom with a lawyer of her own. She was not charged. The investigation found no direct evidence she had participated in the forgery. I believed that, and I did not believe it. Simultaneously, the way you can hold 2 true things at once when one of them is unbearable. Lawrence did not testify in his own defense. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. He was convicted on all 3 counts and sentenced to 4 years in the Ohio correctional system, with eligibility for parole after 28 months. The court also issued a civil judgment requiring restitution, the $220,000 plus the $46,000, plus interest, recoverable against his personal assets, which Catherine informed me were considerably less than he had represented them to be. I walked out of the courthouse into a gray March afternoon. My lawyer was next to me, talking about the restitution timeline. I was only half listening because I was watching a pigeon on the courthouse steps go about its business with the particular indifference of a creature that has no opinion about justice whatsoever. I found that I did not feel triumphant. I did not feel vindicated in the way people describe. What I felt was something quieter, a kind of settling, the way a structure finally rests when the load it's been carrying is correctly distributed. I drove home to Dayton. I stopped at the bakery on Brown Street, and I bought a pecan pie. I sat at my kitchen table and I ate 2 pieces by myself, and I talked to Patricia the way I sometimes do, out loud, quietly, to the kitchen generally, because she is more present in that kitchen than anywhere else. I told her what had happened. I told her the kids were okay, the grandchildren I met. They were going to be okay. I told her I missed her. Then I got up and washed my plate and put the rest of the pie in the refrigerator, and I went to my desk in the back room, where I keep my files, where everything is labeled and organized the way I learned to keep things in 31 years of building things that need to last. In a top drawer, under the hanging file labeled EST8, was an envelope. Catherine had prepared it 8 months earlier when we updated my will. Inside was the new document, the real one, signed, witnessed, new document. The real one, signed, witnessed, notarized. Every letter of my name exactly as I have always written it. I had changed the beneficiaries, not out of anger, out of arithmetic. Out of the same instinct that made me a decent engineer. The understanding that a structure built on a faulty foundation will eventually fail, regardless of how good it looks from the road. My grandchildren's education accounts are funded and protected by a separate trust, administered by Catherine's firm, accessible to them at 22 regardless of anything that happens with either of their parents. The rest goes to the Dayton chapter of a housing nonprofit that Patricia volunteered with for 11 years before she got sick. I sealed the envelope and put it back. Outside, the street was quiet. One of my neighbors was raking leaves, even though it was too cold to rake leaves. The way people do when they need to feel like they're doing something. I watched him for a moment through the window, then I put on my coat. The same coat, the gray one, the one I folded over my arm on Thanksgiving, and I walked out the back door and into my yard where the old oak tree Patricia planted as a sapling in 1989 is now taller than my roof. I stood under it for a while. I did not beg. I did not cry. I did not need anyone to see me win. That is the thing about building things that last. You do not do it for the applause. You do it because you know the difference between what holds and what doesn't, and you refuse, even when it costs you, to put your name on something that will fall. I keep thinking about that oak tree in my backyard. Patricia planted it as a sapling in 1989, a skinny thing about 4 feet tall that I honestly didn't expect to survive its first winter. Now it's taller than my roof. The roots go down farther than I can see. That's the thing about what holds. It doesn't announce itself. It just keeps going down quietly through the cold and the dry years and the years when no one is paying attention. Lawrence thought he had me figured out. I think he looked at a 67-year-old widower in a quiet house in Dayton, and he saw something simple, a man with assets and no one watching. He was a smart man in a lot of ways. He just made the mistake that a certain kind of smart person always makes. He confused stillness for weakness. He saw me not pushing back, and he thought I wasn't paying attention. I was paying attention to everything. That's what I want to say to anyone sitting with something like this right now. Some slow erosion happening at the edges of their life that they can feel but can't quite name yet. The moment you sense something is wrong, that instinct is not paranoia. It is information. The worst thing I did in this whole story was override that instinct twice because I wanted to feel needed, because I confused my own loneliness for evidence that they had good intentions. Doing right by your family does not mean handing them everything without asking questions. That's not generosity. That's abdication. Real integrity. The kind my father had, the kind I tried to have in 31 years of signing my name to structural reports, means you are honest about what you see, even when what you see is someone you love doing something they shouldn't. Even when calling it what it is costs you something. I think about Melissa. I think about her a lot, more than I let on to anyone. She is my daughter, and she's going to have to live with what happened in that house. Not just with the legal consequences for her husband, but with the knowledge of what they tried to take from me. That is its own weight to carry. I cannot carry it for her. What I can do, and what I did, is make sure her children are protected regardless of what she chooses next. That's the thing about consequences. They are not punishment. They are just physics. You build on a faulty foundation. Eventually the structure fails. Lawrence spent years being clever, and it worked right up until it didn't, because cleverness without honesty is a bridge designed to carry less weight than it claims. It holds until it doesn't, and when it goes completely. What kept me standing through all of it? The months of silence, the courthouse visits, the drive home alone after the verdict wasn't anger. Anger burns fast, and it burns you while it burns. What I had was something slower and more load-bearing than that. The knowledge that I had done what was right at every step. That my name on that new will meant exactly what it said. That when they found my signature on Catherine's documents, it was mine. I earned that. 31 years of showing up and doing the work right, even when no one was checking. You don't build that kind of record for moments like this. But when moments like this come, you find out it was worth it. The oak is still out there. I can see it from my kitchen window right now. Patricia knew something I had to learn the hard way, that what you leave behind is not the money, it's the standard you kept. I'm trying to keep it.